Greetings and salutations, fellow book readers. This is Mark, and the book I will review today is The Damned, or in French, là-bas, which means over there, or in this case, down there. Before we continue, this is personalized limited edition of The Damned with leather cover designed and made by me. At the end of the video, I will tell you a couple of ways of how you can get one for yourself if you are interested. Now let's get back to the review. The Damned, or là-bas, is an 1891 novel by the French writer Joris-Karl Huysmans. I like to pronounce Huysmans, but French say it Huysmans. Well, Huysmans or Huysmans worked all his life as a public servant, so perhaps he used writing to add some excitement, balance his life a little, get away from the somewhat boring and predictable routine of government bureaucrat by submerging himself into the world of fiction and fantasies, often dark and decadent. Huysmans is best known for his first novel, A Rebours, or Against Nature. The book was written in his earlier period when he embraced the decadent movement, being somewhat revolted with the society and the limitation it put on the individual. Later, when he got older, more mature and less angry, he became interested in spirituality and its relation with organized religion. It was his return to the Catholic Church, probably searching for something that would allow him to continue to lead a somewhat sane and tolerable life, maybe even gave him some hope, which in itself can become a reason to live. Huysmans was also an art critic, and this was an important influence on his writing. Art and prayer are the only decent ejaculations of the soul. He often used his knowledge of art as a reference, even inspiration, to the premises in his novels. What is The Damned about? It is about how far we are willing to go to feel alive, embracing the extremes of behavior and beliefs, from good to the very worst. Even though the reality was, I was as far from the Gothic towers of romantic fiction as I was to the moon, I saw no reason why you couldn't aspire to a life less ordinary. There is the attraction of the dark and forbidden, because we are curious creatures and we want to make sure there isn't something exciting we are missing on. A bit of the plot. The protagonist of the novel is a writer named Dural. For personal reasons and being tired of his contemporary society, he decides to study a medieval serial killer, Gilles de Retz, and writes a novel about it. Daydream is the only good thing in life. Everything else is vulgar and empty. The research leads him into interacting with various individuals who in different capacity contribute to his knowledge and understanding of the circumstances and personal traits that might lead somebody to engage in such deeds. Dural also becomes involved with a woman he suspects is a Satanist, and this makes him wonder if there is a connection between the medieval violent beliefs and the occultism of his days. And as his relationship with the woman progresses, he becomes a witness to the ritual he was so curious about. And that's the basic plot. What are my thoughts about The Damned? It is a decent novel, not as good as Against Nature, in my opinion. In style, somewhat typical 19th century French novel. I think in general, when translating, something always gets lost or misinterpreted. There are linguistic and cultural differences that must be considered. That's why individuals who read the original often seem to have a better understanding of the work. It brings to mind the film Lost in Translation with Bill Murray, which implied that things are different and difficult to understand when taken out of familiar context. I read The Damned in French as well, but my French is not good enough to fully appreciate Huysmans' style, even though it did sound better in the original. The protagonist, Dural, might be seen as the alter ego of Huysmans. He appears in the following 3 novels, and all the novels embody Dural's slow return to the Catholic faith. Jean de Sand from Against the Nature could be considered part of the journey before the journey began, but I think he was just too extreme to offer any hope for redemption, so Huysmans preferred to keep him as a singular character. But I always thought it would have been interesting if he had continuation in The Damned, kind of reborn Christian, moving from one extreme to the other. But for this type of people, the switch is instant, and there is no long journey, rather a unique event that throws them over the fence. I still see Dural as a continuation of the Sant in some form. He is as revolted with the contemporary society as the other, but 10 years older than the former, more mature, he is able to better accept and control his revulsion, and is able to channel it into something more constructive, writing. Really, when I think it over, literature has only one excuse for existing. It saves the person who makes it from the disgustingness of life. Dural finds everything around him meaningless and is searching for something more, beyond, that could give some meaning to life. And he asks himself why not believe in divinity. He finds his safe space in reading and studying history, and realizes that the society has always been revolting to some members, and they have shown it in different manners. He thinks the driving force behind the revulsion might have been the very lack of meaning that he feels, and they, just like him, search for the antidote. Dural uses Gilles de Haye, who is a sinister but interesting personality, as an example of the hidden, dark and violent instinct inside of us, and to what extreme they can take us if given free rein. It might even be brought out by boredom. He himself admitted, "Nothing brought me more pleasure than torture, tears, terror, and blood." Gilles de Haye, for the first part of his life, was an individual to look up to. He participated in 100 Years' War. 100 Years' War was a long conflict where the English tried to conquer France by taking over the French monarchy. The distinct figure of this period was Joan d'Arc, whom Gilles de Haye followed. After her execution, he became the commander of the French army, a hero, and then something happened to him. What I am has no bearing on who I become. Maybe it was brewing all along, the result, possibly, of being abandoned by his mother, the strict upbringing by his grandfather, even disguised hate of his younger brother. Whatever it was, he started torturing and killing children, hundreds of them, depopulating entire areas, using some of the most brutal torture and killing methods one can imagine, and some of them are graphically described in the novel. Gilles de Haye was a curious and educated man with an impressive library of books for his time before Gutenberg, when books were still written by hand and cost a fortune, and he took them with him when he traveled. Most of his books were on theology, so he was interested in Christianity, but perhaps he found the ideas disappointing and they did not give him enough satisfaction, so he turned to another extreme to see if it offered more. And maybe it was to challenge, provoke God, to see how far he could go before God intervened, to test how much power God really held over individuals. And if the fear of him was justified. And it cost a fortune, and he took them, and cost a fortune, and he took them with him when he traveled. Most of his books were on theology, so he was interested in Christianity, but perhaps he found the ideas disappointing, and they did not give him enough satisfaction. So he turned to another extreme to see if it offered more. And maybe it was to challenge, provoke God, to see how far he could go before God intervened, to test how much power God really held over individuals, and if the fear of him was justified. Maybe he also wanted to see how merciful God was. In the end, he kissed Jesus' feet on the crucifix and asked to forgive the biggest sinner. Another reason could be his hate of God for what he has done or allowed to happen, and he decided to take it out on man, God's creature, the most innocent of it, the children, before they were corrupted by the God's world. Maybe he thought they would feel the pain most intensely because they were totally undeserving of it. Gilles de Haye also enjoyed good life, fine food, jewelry, and can be seen as the 15th century version of the previously mentioned Jean de Saint from Against Nature. Comparing the two can be seen as a linear evolution of individuals influenced by the times they lived in, one more physical, influenced by the violence and wars around him, and the other more cerebral, product of intellectual existence, but both reflections of the same idea, revulsion with the world around them. You will find the explanation for present-day Satanism there, or at least the greater part of it, for without sacrilegious priests a tradition of Satanism is impossible. And the woman, Madame Chantelouve, the people like her, Satanists, represent modern-day Gilles de Haye, extremists looking for something to make them feel alive. Of course, they evolve over time and adapted their method to the modern world. She is somewhat confused, searching for her holy grail of happiness. That's why she initiates her adulterous relationship with Dural. She is quite persistent in pursuing him and also tries Satanism to see if it will do the trick. Actually went after Dural, the type of relationship she could have with him, because for her the Satanism seemed not to deliver. And Dural wonders what is it she wants from him, since he cannot see what he has to offer her. He is apprehensive about it, even afraid of her. His cat hides under the bed when she enters, and it makes him think. But the encounter is also an opportunity for some free sex. If she is pretty, I'll sleep with her. At least I shall get her out of my hair that way. But with time he becomes more interested in her connection with Satanism and what he can learn from her, the references he can get to use in his book about Gilles de Haye. The book uses people's attraction to satanic beliefs as an example of Dural society's dissatisfaction and revulsion. There are different characters who dissect it and analyze it from their own references and beliefs. Dural, as a historian and novelist, looks at it from the historic perspective. He is also a bit of a romantic, so there is some emotional connection to the subject, and being fond of a woman who is a Satanist adds to the excitement. Then there is Dr. de Hermes, who offers more pragmatic opinions based on science. The heart, said to be man's noblest organ, has the same shape as the penis, commonly supposed the most ignoble. The symbolism is not inappropriate, because the love which comes from the heart soon extends to the organ which it resembles. But he is not satisfied with purely scientific explanations and is also interested in a possibility of supernatural explanation.